The second citation for 199 is the case notes of Detective Corey Williams. This is the December 6, 2005 entry. Today I met John Owlett, Gary Gray, Dave Robertson, and the MSP Crime Scene Unit in front of 3975 Cass Avenue in Detroit. I thought that I had determined for sure that this was the home that Lawson had described as being the place that Bob Moore had lived and run a bike shop out of in Detroit. Lawson has said that this was one of the places that Moore was involved in filming the kids for child pornography. We were going to take a look in the basement for old blood or semen. After we met, we realized there were discrepancies in Lawson's stories on the location of this home. I called Pastor Felix Lorenz, who was the associate pastor of the Cass Methodist Church located in that area. He stated that he did not remember a bike shop out of a house back then, but that he did not live in the area. I called Reverend Lewis Redman, who was the senior pastor of this church in the late 70s and lived near the church. Reverend Redman's wife returned my call and told me that she wasn't sure her husband would know anything like that, but that maybe her son would, that is 43 years old now. She said that her son was at work and she would ask him later. Phone conversation with Reverend Lewis Redman's wife. Reverend Redman's wife called me back later and said that her son did not remember anything like what I was describing, but that she had been thinking about it and remembered that a guy named George McMahon owns a home in the area and has lived there for many years. I was familiar with this name as a guy Lawson named in a 1988 interview, as a guy that was involved in a pedophile pornography ring in the Cass Corridor area back in the 1970s. The report from this interview said that McMahon was supplying children to Bob Moore at that time to be filmed in this pornography. Reverend Redman's wife said that George McMahon is retired from the Detroit Public Schools and was employed for many years as the community agent for the schools and worked out of Burton Elementary School in the Cass Corridor. Earlier info from Lawson about Bob Moore was that Moore lived near the elementary school on Cass. She said that it was George's job to make sure the kids went to school. She told me that George lives on Brainerd between Cass and 2nd, near the church, and that he is a white male and would be in his early 60s today. She gave me George's phone number as redacted. She then began to talk about another guy that grew up redacted. She said his name is redacted and that he is long redacted, but that sentence or sentences could possibly be retrieved. Might be enough letter squiggles there to decipher it. She said that when Redacted was 14 years old, he came to live with their family at the Cass Methodist Church. She said that Redacted knew everyone in the neighborhood and was a problem child. She indicated that Redacted would not attend school, and they eventually sent him away to a school where the kids are locked down. I then began an investigation into these two names. I performed an auto-track check and located George McMahon, born Redacted 1939, living at Redacted in the city of Detroit. It showed a phone number for McMahon as 313 Redacted. See McMahon file for other people associated to that address. A few of the names mentioned in the AutoTrack report are Freddie Gaines, Tina Harrison, and Margaret Redmond Squires. I obtained the phone number, redacted. I called, and redacted will be redacted. Today, Gary, Dave, and I are going to go interview George and redacted about Bob Moore, Ted Lamborghini, and Richard Lawson about what was going on at Moore's house and the child pornography they were involved in that area in the 1970s. The third entry for citation 199 is case notes of Detective Corey Williams from January 20th, 2006. Gary and I went over to George McMahon's today and showed him the report from the interview of Richard Lawson in 1988. We wanted to see if McMahon could identify who number 1 is in the report. Everyone else mentioned by Lawson during that interview has been identified. Now that George McMahon has passed the polygraph, we tried to get him to open up about what Lawson said about McMahon also being a person who supplied kids to Bob Moore to be filmed, but that he was not involved with the kids missing from Oakland County. McMahon was uncooperative about this and continued to distance himself from Bob Moore and any involvement he had with Moore other than what he told us during the first interview. McMahon said that he knew Moore and that he used to take his and his kids' bikes there to be fixed, but that he didn't know anything about any filming that was going on. I asked George if he thought that Chuck Flieger could possibly be the person called number 1 by Lawson during that interview. McMahon said that he didn't think so, but he guessed it could be possible. Redacted called me this afternoon with information about a friend of his that is a 48-year-old white male that told Redacted that when he was 12 years old, he was molested and paid $50 to be in a child pornography movie. This subject told Redacted that this took place at the house on 2nd Avenue, just south of Selden, that Pat Dorn currently lives in. The subject told Redacted that he had entered a side door of this house when this occurred. Redacted said that he thought that George McMahon owned this house at that time and rented it out. Redacted said that this 48-year-old subject thought that the guy that he was with that was renting the part of the house that he had been in was involved in fixing bikes. During an earlier interview with Linda Lawrence, she stated that she thought that George McMahon owned the house on 2nd that Pat Dorn currently lives in. Lawrence told detectives that she thought that McMahon rented out this house. It is possible that Bob Moore was renting this house at that time, from 72 to 73, from George McMahon. I will get the deed transfers on that house from Wayne County records. McMahon has continued to deny that he has ever owned or been associated with Pat Dorn's current house. Just as a side note here, this matter of being paid $50 to be in a child pornography movie, that particular payment amount has come up multiple times in the investigation into child pornography in the 1970s, not even just limited to the OCCK case. It's kind of interesting. Citations 200 and 201, case notes of Detective Corey Williams, November 14th, 2007 entry. I had been meaning to take a look at Kent Schultz's CCH after his name jumped out at me on the list at MSP of those suspects that had taken and cleared a polygraph in regards to the Oakland County child killings back in the 1970s. Wasser had told me that the suspect in question, that had confessed to him about the child killings, had been brought to his, Wasser's, office by his attorney on a separate CSC case, shortly after he had been cleared by MSP in the child killings. Kent Schultz's CCH showed that he was arrested in Wayne County on October 27, 1977 for CSC and was found guilty in 3rd Circuit Court, sentenced to 5 to 15 years in the CSC case in April of 1978. I called Dave Robertson and asked him when Schultz was polygraphed, to which he stated that he was polygraphed in December of 1977 by examiner Ramatowski, an MSP examiner, and cleared. I called Jim Bevins, chief investigator at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and asked him to pull the court file on this case and see if Schultz's attorney in the CSC case was Jane Burgess. CSC is criminal sexual conduct, and Jane Burgess, I believe, was the lawyer who accompanied Christopher Bush in his off-the-record polygraph that he gave to Larry Wasser, in which he confessed to the killings. Bevins agreed to attempt to locate this court file, or DPD's file, on this case. I knew this was the CSC case that Lawson was the informant on when Schultz was arrested. Lawson had told me about the Schultz case during one of my early interviews with him. Lawson had also told me at that time that he was working for Ike McKinnon on this case when they arrested Schultz, and that McKinnon was in charge of the Detroit Police Sex Crimes Unit at that time. I had interviewed Ike McKinnon about this back on June 2nd, 2005. See the original interview of Ike McKinnon on June 2nd, 2005 for details. At which time he confirmed Lawson's story. McKinnon stated that his crew was working alongside the Oakland County Task Force on this Schultz case, and when they arrested Schultz, they were certain they had arrested the Oakland County child killer. McKinnon told me that Schultz was then cleared of involvement in the child killings after passing a state police polygraph. Some of this information about Schultz is matching what Wasser is holding. Schultz definitely could be the person that was cleared through a polygraph by MSP in the 70s. Then shortly after, confessed to Wasser during a pre-polygraph interview on a separate CSC case. I'm trying to determine if Schultz had Burgess as his attorney then. The only other thing that does not match up to what Wasser is saying is that Schultz is still alive. Wasser is either lying about that or didn't know the person is still living. Schultz is currently serving 3 20 to 40-year sentences for multiple CSCs, ones against children that he committed in Ingham County, Michigan in 1984. Schultz is housed with Michigan Department of Corrections at the Parnell Correctional Facility in Jackson, Michigan. Kent Schultz was connected to Josiah Tazalar, Francis Sheldon, and ex-Michigan Senator Jack Faxon at that time. Faxon was in public office at the time of the killings and was friends with Schultz along with the others. With some interviews of Redacted and Redacted, we can probably shore up these connections to Schultz and the additional connections to Ted Lamborghini, Willem Tazalar, and Bob Moore. Citation 202. Man, 39, accused of sex with children. The Lansing State Journal, August 28, 1984. Kent Schultz, 39, of 135 North Foster Street, was charged Monday afternoon with 4 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct in connection with what prosecutors say was sexual activity with at least 4 neighborhood children. Lansing District Court Judge Terrence Clem set bond at $25,000 surety, and Schultz was transferred to the Ingham County Jail after failing to post bail. Chief Assistant Ingham County Prosecutor Kim Eddy said Schultz was arrested by Michigan State Police troopers Saturday following an investigation with Child and Protective Services personnel. Eddy said the complaint alleges sexual encounters with an 11-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy, along with a 7-year-old boy and 9-year-old boy during August. Citation 203. Case notes of Detective Corey Williams. October 20th, 2008 entry. Received the Huntington Beach PD reports today on Green's arrest in 1974 for multiple CSCs in Huntington, California. This is Gregory Green, Chris Bush's colleague. This police report outlined the investigation into the incident that led to Green being arrested, charged with 45 to 50 counts of child molestation, false imprisonment, attempted murder, and then being sent to a state mental hospital where he did only 6 to 12 months and was then released. During the interview of Green, after his arrest, he named at least 15 young male victims that he had molested and sodomized many times, adding that he had molested children over 200 times while in California. Green told police he worked with a pedophile friend named Ed Mann, who ran the baseball league that Green coached in. Green told police that Mann was also a pedophile and gave Green a job coaching in exchange for Green bringing young boys to Mann for him to molest. The incident in which Green was arrested and jailed for involved a 12-year-old white male victim named Redacted. It's presumably saying he lives somewhere, a redacted city in California. Green took this boy out to a drive-in, got him some alcohol and marijuana, and then, after dark, told the boy that they were going to go retrieve a bicycle that Green had stolen earlier and stashed near the baseball fields. Green took this boy to the wooded area of the fields near the San Diego freeway and began to molest him. Green performed oral sex on this boy, then the boy became uncooperative. Based on admissions to the police by Green about anally sexually molesting boys, that is probably what Green was attempting to do when this boy became uncooperative. Green told the police that he struck the boy in the neck to keep him quiet and then put his hand over the boy's mouth until he was quiet. The doctors determined that the boy had actually been strangled by Green and showed abrasions on the inside of the mouth where Green had held his hand over the boy's mouth. After the boy was unconscious or dead, Green held a lit cigarette up to the boy's nose in an attempt to wake him. When this didn't work, Green pushed the lit cigarette into the skin on the boy's belly 3 times, attempting to see if the boy would wake up or was alive. Green then dragged the boy through the woods and field to his car and dumped him face down in the back seat of the car. Green then drove around LA trying to figure out what to do with this boy. Green eventually drove near an area hospital and dumped the boy, who was still unconscious, on the grass around the corner from the hospital. Green did not know whether the boy was alive or dead at this time. Green then drove across the street from the hospital to a payphone and called the hospital about this boy, stating that he found the boy unconscious and he thinks he needed help. Green did not give his name. After driving around, Green checked to see if they found the boy, and they had not, so he called again. The boy was eventually found, was alive, and treated. This MO of Greg Green's, or handling of the victim, is very similar to the OCCK case in regards to the age of the boy, anally molested, strangled, suffocated, and dumped in an area where they would be found. See Huntington Beach Police Department's report for details. Bush has also put his hand over a boy's mouth to keep him quiet when he was screaming. Bush did this to Vince Gunnels at Bush's house in Alma when Bush was trying to anally molest Gunnels. See interview transcripts of Gunnels' interview at Camp Ojibwe for details. This is James Vincent Gunnels. Citation 204 is the Flint Police Department application for arrest warrant of Gregory Green, complaint number 189277, January 25th, 1977. This is being retrieved from the hotstar.net, which is Dovey's personal website. Supplement to Circuit Court History. Defendant Gregory Green. Complaint number 1892. Charge criminal sexual conduct, first degree. On January 25, 1977, Officer Tom Waldron of the Flint Police Department presented Assistant Prosecutor Lenore Ferber with the prepared circuit court history. After reviewing the court history, Ms. Ferber issued the order for warrant charging Gregory W. Green with three counts of criminal sexual conduct, first degree, on complaints 1571, 1891, 1892. On January 25, 1977, at approximately 2:00 p.m., the complainants on these aforementioned complaints, being redacted, met Officer Waldron at Judge Shaker's courtroom. At this time, Judge Shaker swore the complainants and signed the warrants against Gregory Green. At approximately 3:00 p.m. Tuesday, January 25, 1977, Sergeant Francis Miller and Officer Tom Waldron proceeded to the area of the redacted and arrested Gregory W. Green with the warrants charging him with 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. The vehicle owned by this subject, a brown 1974 Chevrolet van bearing 1976 license, I'm assuming plates, which was redacted, which Green was arrested, but it may be something else, but I think it's that, which Green was arrested from, was searched by Officer Waldron and subsequently tied up by Officer Gary Jennings. The defendant was then transported to the Morals Squad office of the Flint Police Department, where he was advised of the charges against him and of his constitutional rights by Officer Tom Waldron in the presence of Sergeant Miller, which he stated he understood and waived. The defendant stated that he had returned to Flint, Michigan, approximately February 14, 1976, after spending approximately 5 years in the state of California. He stated that while in Orange County, California, he had been arrested on a marijuana charge and also for criminal sexual conduct charges, approximately 45 counts, and after pleading guilty to 1 count, had spent 6 months in the Orange County Jail and 1 year in the Patton State Mental Hospital in Patton, California, being released from that institution on or about January 15, 1976. He further stated he is currently serving a 5-year probationary period for that offense, and David Witter, Genesee County Adult Probation, is currently his probation officer. In the middle of May 1976, he had obtained employment at the Kmart store on Belzay Road as a third-shift custodian, but has since been discharged from that place of employment. In June 1976, he became involved as the manager of a Little League baseball team in the area of his home at Redacted. He stated in June of 1976 he purchased a 125cc Yamaha from the Yamaha dealer in Flushing, which he financed through Citizens Bank. In August or September, he purchased a 1974 Chevrolet van from Al Serra Chevrolet, which was also financed through Citizens Bank. He further stated that since May of 1976, he has seen his counselor, Redacted, of the Genesee County Mental Health Department approximately twice a week, this being a mandatory part of his California probation. The defendant, Gregory Green, stated he became acquainted with the complainant, redacted, a male, white, 12 years old, complainant number 1571, or complaint number 1571, through the Little League baseball team in June. He stated he became sexually involved with him in July and had approximately 5 to 10 different sexual involvements with this boy, the last time being somewhere in November. He stated the sexual involvement consisted of mutual oral copulation and that he had attempted anal intercourse, but that redacted was found to be too small. He further stated he engaged in mutual oral copulation with redacted during the months of July and August, but did not know on how many occasions. Mr. Green related that most of these offenses had occurred in his home at redacted, more specifically in his bedroom. But then on occasion, some of these acts had occurred on the bike trail behind Northwestern High School, where he took the boys for rides on his motorcycle, and some of the acts had occurred in his van. He stated that he had mutual oral copulation with redacted, male, white, 12 years old, complainant number 1892, at least 10 times during the period from June until through the Christmas vacation of 1976. Upon completing this interview with Gregory W. Green, he was lodged in the Flint City Jail by Officer Tom Waldron. A Western hunting knife, which was located above the visor in Mr. Green's van, and an envelope with the inscription, "You can fool your brothers by pretending you're going into the school by the cafeteria. Put your hood up and walk over to the church," which was taken from Mr. Green's person, was turned in by Officer Waldron on property receipt number 64680. Mr. Green related he had written this note with the intention of getting it to long redacted. Or maybe not long redacted, who knows. On January 26, 1977, Wednesday, Gregory W. Green appeared before Judge Shaker, at which time bond was set at $25,000 on each count, bringing the total bond to $75,000. Citation 206 is Michigan PD Incident Report, complaint number 2768677, February 24th, 1977. This comes from Catherine Broad's blog, the sister of Timothy King, who was the final victim of the Oakland County child killings. We're going to start at the bottom of this page where it says interview of. This is redacted, but this is an interview of Kenneth Bowman, victim of Greg Green and Christopher Bush. Excuse me. Interview of Kenneth Bowman by Sergeant Francis Miller, Flint PD. Redacted. At approximately 4:15 p.m., January 26, 1977, Sergeant Francis Miller interviewed one redacted of redacted in the Juvenile Bureau with the consent of Mrs. Bowman. At this time, redacted related that he knew both Greg Green and Chris Bush. He knew Chris Bush for a few weeks about 2 months ago. On a Saturday, the first part of the summer of 1976, Greg Green and Chris Bush came to his house about 4:15 p.m. Chris came to the door and told him Greg was outside and he wanted to see him, so redacted went out. Greg was driving a blue Vega with a white interior with a white stripe on the side. Redacted stated he got in the car in the back seat. Chris got in the back seat with him, and Greg was in the driver's seat. Redacted asked where they were going, and they said they were going out by Dixie Highway and by the field on the dirt road. They didn't tell him why they were going out there, but Redacted stated he knew why, because the only time they come over is when they like you. Greg drove the car out there as Chris told him where to go. They went down Dixie Highway to a dirt road by a hotel by the lake, and Chris told Greg to turn, and they drove for about a half hour, riding around on the dirt road. Then Chris said to stop, and Greg stopped the car. After they stopped, they were laughing and talking, and Chris asked if he, Redacted, wanted to go walking around, and Redacted said no. Chris told Redacted he didn't have to go. Redacted stated he didn't want to get out of the car because Chris might molest him or kill him. He stated he was afraid. He stated he thought they might molest or kill him because it was out in the woods and on a dirt street and nobody around. He stated he was afraid of them because they were homosexuals. Chris asked Redacted to pull down his pants, and Redacted asked him what for. Chris said, "I want to suck your dick," and Redacted went along with this. Redacted, this was for about 15 minutes. Chris then had Redacted commit an oral copulation on him. Redacted stated Chris had done this about 3 times before to him. Redacted stated he had just turned 13 years old the first time, and his birthday is Redacted. He met Chris through Greg Green when Greg brought Chris over to Redacted's house. He met Greg Green last summer, and he owned a 1970 Impala, a gray color one. Greg picked Redacted up when he was hitchhiking with Redacted. Greg, on this date, talked about sexual acts to both Redacted, but they decided not to, as Greg suggested at this time. One night, Redacted, Greg, long Redacted, and Greg bought beer. Redacted stated he didn't drink any, but Redacted got drunk, and that was when it all started with Greg. Redacted stated that Greg has had sexual acts with him about 4 or 5 times. He stated Greg lives on Redacted. Stated he saw Greg commit sexual acts on Redacted in the back seat while at the drive-in. Excuse me. On one occasion, Greg Green picked Redacted up in his van. Redacted stated Greg bought 2 bottles of wine and asked Redacted if he wanted some and declined. Greg got drunk after drinking the wine and drove the van behind the roller haven on Saginaw Street. Greg turned off the lights and locked the van doors, closed the curtains in the van, and started talking with Redacted. Greg asked Redacted if he could suck his dick, and Redacted asked him if he'd let him, would he take him right home, and Greg agreed. During the oral copulation, Greg grabbed Redacted by the neck and started choking him until he passed out. Greg later returned Redacted to his home. Redacted stated this van was a 1974 Chevrolet, brown in color. Redacted stated that Chris Bush has had sexual acts with him about 3 times. These acts occurred in Chris's car in a field up by Northwestern High School, where the motorcycle trails are at. Redacted stated that Greg Green forced him to have anal intercourse. He stated Greg has done this to him once. This occurred when Redacted spent the night at Greg's house. Redacted stated that Greg had told him that Chris Bush had killed one kid out in the woods up by Chris's house a couple of years ago. Greg had told him this last spring. Redacted stated that Chris has never forced him to do any of the things. He did them on his own.